Aboard the flashing hooves, Admiral Nerya struggled to keep the battered remains of what was once the largest fleet in the known galaxy intact. Have those Arkan dreadnoughts fill that hole in the formation. They will last longer there than those battleships. I want the Kaiser battleship squadron networked. Their lasers have a faster traverse than ours. We can use them to augment our point defense and maybe take out some of those cruisers. All ships, concentrate your main batteries on the Russian battleships. Their dreadnoughts' forward shields are too strong, and we can't hit those cruisers that are inside our formation without risking friendly fire. Nerya winced as yet another ship in her command exploded. It was the charging Gallop Admiral. I'm showing all hands lost. Her Vice Admiral reported. He had at least recovered enough to read battle reports. Behind their path of travel, the holo screens showed a trail of dead or dying ships, some venting atmosphere, some on fire. It pained Nerya to leave them and their crews behind. Admiral. Human ships are approaching. Their IFF identifies them as destroyers. They're followed by what looks to be approximately 300 of what they call fighters. They appear to be about the third of the size of the Russian skirmishers. The destroyers are requesting permission to join the battle network. Make it so. As the connection was made, a torrent of new data flooded their holoscreens. Human sensors, it seemed, were very, very good. It also answered where all of the tiny human ships had come from. The two large ships that Nerya had thought were support ships were instead labeled as CV Helena and CV Columbia. A computer query translated CV to fleet carrier. Nerya had never heard of such a ship, but if the tiny vessels it carried, which seemed to only have a crew of 1 or 2, were effective against the Russian skirmishers, she didn't care. The human destroyers are slowing, Admiral. Did they change their minds? No, Vice Admiral, they've reversed their thrust to match our velocity. If they didn't, they would interpolate with our formation. It looks like they mean to join our formation instead. The comm officer spoke up again. We have a message from the human destroyers. They claim to have full point defense suites and have requested to be placed in the formation where they can be the most combat effective. Very good. Have them take position just inside our outer shell of ships. We don't want them exposed to heavy laser fire from those Russian dreadnoughts. Hopefully they can take care of some of these skirmishers. The human destroyers took up station within the League fleet. From each destroyer, Gatling point defense lasers sprung to life, firing thousands of individual laser beams per second. Box launchers ripple-fired small, maneuverable missiles that tracked the Russian parasite skirmishers. Meanwhile, double-barreled plasma cannons swiveled to track the Russian destroyers and cruisers that still played havoc within the League formation. On Nerya's holoscreen, she noticed 2 Russian destroyers blink off the plot. From 3 of the human destroyers, 12 larger missiles sprang from internal missile tubes, all targeting 1 Russian cruiser that had just finished mauling a League battleship, forcing it to fall out of formation. The Russian cruiser tried to corkscrew away from the missiles and took one out with its secondary batteries, but the other 11 anti-ship missiles struck true, enveloping the Russian cruiser in fire. The Russian reacted quickly to this new threat. Their pursuing battleships and dreadnoughts began to concentrate fire on the destroyers, while the Russian skirmishers made mass attacks on them. The human destroyers' point defense was deadly against them, but even so, some made it through. 1, then 2 more human destroyers were overwhelmed by the combined fire of the Russian dreadnoughts and their hordes of skirmishers. All Bonthan dreadnoughts, Admiral Nerya ordered. Mark a human destroyer. I want you to physically insert yourself between that destroyer and guns of those Russian dreadnoughts. Those destroyers are the only ships we have that are effective against those cruisers and destroyers. Nerya felt the flashing hooves shudder as it took another blow as it interposed itself in front of the destroyer Boyington. Nerya could not believe how much firepower the little ship was putting out. Missiles, point defense lasers, plasma cannons, even what looked to be kinetics of all things, seemed to fire from every point on the ship. Even with the added protection of the huge Bonthan dreadnoughts acting as additional armor for the human destroyers, there were simply too many small ration ships for them to handle. Nerya pounded a grasping hoof in frustration as more ration skirmishers made an attack run on the Boyington, faster than the flashing hoof's lasers could track. 2, then 4, then 7 skirmishers were destroyed by the Boyington's point defense system and missiles, but still 18 came on, weaving to avoid the Boyington's defenses. Nerya was sure that the Boyington was done for when suddenly, a swarm of missiles appeared behind the ration skirmishers, tearing their formation apart with scores of explosions as each missile found its target. Juking through the explosions, 2 tiny human, 1 crew craft emerged, doubtlessly the source of the missiles that finished off the squadron of skirmishers. The human, what did they call them, fighters, had arrived. "It's about time you got here." Lieutenant Ket Bug, yes, recognized the voice of the captain of the Boyington, Sally Marshall, broadcasting in the clear. "No one likes to be early for a party," replied Ket's wingman Steve Jester Hendricks. Ket whipped her F-7 Bearcat space superiority fighter around the nose of the DD Pappy Boyington, following her wingman's lead to a new group of hostiles. Hundreds of red icons dotted Ket's tack screen on her HUD, and she mentally sent a signal to her flight computer to zoom the screen to a smaller, more manageable piece of the battlefield. Her helmet fed vid screens in front of each of her compound eyes, giving her the equivalent of binocular vision. Its bulbous appearance, with a bulge around each of her eyes, gave her an insect-like appearance with it on, hence her call sign. Ket was one of the few Dreeden that possessed the innate aggression to make her suitable as a fighter pilot, and was proud to be one of a handful of Dreeden candidates to make it through flight school. Despite her un-Dreeden-like aggressiveness, Ket knew that she didn't have the bloodthirsty instincts that a human fighter pilot did, and let herself follow her wingman's lead. "You with me, Bug?" "Right with you, Jester." Ket formed up her fighter with her wingman as they pursued another group of ration skirmishers that were headed for a League dreadnought. Each skirmisher was about 3 times the size of a Bearcat, with 2 forward particle cannons and a gimbaled laser cannon. They were fast, but not nearly as maneuverable as the human-made fighters. It was the gimbaled laser that made things tricky, Ket thought, juking her fighter laterally with a quick tap of her rudder pedals to avoid laser fire that impacted on her shields. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you want to listen to the subsequent parts of this story.